You're listening to the Yeahbutum Media Podcast. They're a mother-daughter team who love to research, think deeply, and talk about their opinions on strange, unconventional, weird, and downright crazy topics. And now, here are your hosts, Gritzy and Yeahbutum.
Hi guys, and welcome to episode 7 of the Yeahbutum podcast. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about EMPs, which are electromagnetic pulses. Recently in the news, you may have seen that a North Korean electromagnetic attack could wipe out 90% of the US population. That would probably happen within 1 year. We found this on Business Insider, Forbes.com, and you've probably heard about all of the threats from North Korea lately. So we're going to, delve into what exactly EMPs are, how they can happen, what could happen, and how you can protect yourself from them. So, Mom, what exactly are EMPs?
An EMP is an electromagnetic pulse. One of the ways it can happen is from a coronal mass ejection from the sun. It basically sends an electromagnetic wave over a geographic area, and what it can do is basically fry electrical and electronic components so that they're unusable after that. So if we had something like an EMP, which would be a high altitude nuclear blast detonated over the US, it could wipe out most of the electronics unless they were protected by a faraday cage or some other type of protection. And without those, our highly electronic civilization would just come to a screeching halt. You wouldn't even be able to pump gas.
They don't necessarily happen just from a nuclear explosion. They can also happen from a solar flare or a coronal mass ejection, like in 1859 with the Carrington event. Thankfully, at that time, we didn't have a lot of the technology we have today and lots of things running on electricity, but telegraphs were. And when there was a solar flare that was so large, it actually burned some of the operators' hands through the wires. A lot of the wires produced sparks and basically shut the whole entire telegraph system down. Now, if something like that were to happen today, we wouldn't be able to do practically anything. And even people who have wells, if you have a pump for your well, that wouldn't work. If you have a car that's been built in the last 20 years, it probably wouldn't work. If you have any of the modern technologies that we have today, it would all be gone. Another thing I was actually just thinking is I wonder if people with pacemakers and things like that would be affected.
It could definitely. I don't know. It definitely could be an issue because they are electronic. They do send signal.
Right.
Because doctors' offices can monitor a person's pacemaker if they decide to.
Right.
Even this could happen, and if you didn't have cash on hand, cash register point of sale systems aren't going to be operating. So the only people who could actually come in and even be able to make a purchase would be people who have cash on hand. And I know most of the people that I am aware of are using less and less cash. You could probably ask 50 people on the street and not 1 in 100 would have more than $50 on them in cash because everybody uses their credit or debit card and just has it all go to one processing system.
The problem is if something like this happened, let's say you went to the grocery store, well, their refrigeration systems wouldn't work or anything either. So you're looking at 24 to 48 hours of food spoiling and probably be lots of looting going on. I mean, there's not going to be people acting civilly in any state or city. I mean, whether or not 50% of the people are, or even 80% of the people are, if you have 20% of the population just figuring it's the end of the world and taking advantage of it, it's not probably even going to be safe to go to grocery stores. And then, of course, our transportation system would not be working because you can't pump gas if you don't have electricity. I mean, maybe some trucking companies I know do have their own pumps and things like that, and maybe some of them do work, they have a backup system or something like that, but you're not going to get very far away from your trucking hub and, be out on a highway and try to find a place to get gas to even transport food. And I mean, even the electronics in the refrigerated trucks would be fried. You're basically looking at 1 week max until most people have no food or water left in their home.
Well, and even right now, no problems, no issues. There's only 3 days worth of groceries in the supermarkets at any time because they operate under just-in-time inventory. So they only keep what they can do. So you're 9 meals away from no food supply. In the best case scenario right now with nothing happening. So once that happened, you know what it's like during a snowstorm. It's predicted and everybody goes and wipes out all the bread, milk, and toilet paper as if that's the only 3 things we'll need. But you see that even on a prediction of a storm. So if this actually happened, you would already need to have a plan in place on what you're going to do. And you don't want to wait till what happens to execute the plan. Anything that can be done ahead, like having additional food and water stored would be good. A lot of people have a gas can to fill their mower. You should, have your gas cans filled up all the time. And at least you'd have enough to maybe get yourself home or to a safe place.
Well, if the car even worked, it probably wouldn't.
If the car even worked.
Most people's cars now are not even going to work.
Right.
So, you would have to have some alternate way to even get groceries. If you live 20 minutes away from your closest grocery store and that's a 20-minute drive, what's that on a bike? Are you even willing to go out on a bike? What if it's the middle of winter? Are you going to risk doing that when there's mass chaos going on and expose yourself like that? I don't know. So it's kind of like you need to have alternate forms of transportation too, because most people aren't going to be able to get anywhere except for people who have older cars who have no electronic systems in them.
Or farms that have horse and buggy, horse and wagon. I mean, it's surprising to think what it would be like to be living again in the 1800s, but you really have to start processing those scenarios in your mind and see, what could I do in this case? And like Yeahbutum said, are you going to be someone who wants to be out on the roads when this is happening? Because just your being out there on a bike or something else tells them you have means to go somewhere.
Right. Or even the only people's lives who wouldn't be changed drastically are the Amish.
Right.
Who then might become targets.
Right.
I mean, because they're the only people now who know what to do without thinking about it. And
right.
Everyone now, even when, if you don't know ahead of time and research it and prepare, you're not going to know what to do in a certain situation because you're not going to have the internet. I don't know if banks would enforce it, or the government. I mean, even if you have no mortgage and you own your house, you still have to pay taxes.
Mm-hmm.
So what happens if you can't get to the money in your bank account and pay your taxes? Does the government then... They could come and take your land and say, well, you didn't pay your taxes. And you could say, well, I couldn't. And too bad.
Right. One thing, it's a complete domino effect.
Yeah.
One item can lead to another can lead to another. And that's why the studies of people who've spent time studying this say that 90% of the population could be gone in 1 year's time.
Right. Think about all of the people now who are dependent on electronics just for basic health needs.
Like diabetics.
Yeah, diabetics, keeping their insulin stored, tracking their blood sugar, even with those glucose monitors, that's an electric thing.
Mm-hmm.
How, if you're not able to do that, how are you going to know? How are you even going to get insulin after your supply runs out, even if you could keep it cold?
Right.
How are you going to have the means to get that? Or if you're on prescription drugs that aren't readily available or you can't stock up on them, you're going to be out of luck in that scenario. So I guess, the first thing is basic survival needs. What do you need to do to remove yourself from being dependent on those things? And then think about the luxuries later on.
Right. Well, and even just thinking about the whole prescription meds, there are so many people in the United States on antidepressants. And if they are unable to get that in, say, 3 weeks after this would happen, if they can't get their meds, there is going to be some serious mental meltdowns widespread through the population, because as many as 30 or 40% of the population at any given time are on different antidepressant type meds. And that, not only would they be suffering withdrawals, there could be psychotic breaks. And if you're already under this survival stress and then that happens, that's just like chaos on steroids.
Right. Think of the average crazy person you see at Walmart and multiply that by about 100 million.
Right.
Especially in a scenario like that, it's just nobody's going to care. Everyone's just going to try to do what they can to get by.
And I've heard Gerald Celente say that once a person has nothing left, they have nothing left to do. So anything that they normally would have never considered as an action they would take is now on the table, because they're desperate and they're going to do whatever it takes to get what they need. And if you're not prepared and have a plan, not just for the supplies you need, but even for a defensive system, you're going to be a sitting target.
Right. And I think we actually talked about this in a podcast we did in August. I'm not sure which episode it was, but we linked to a video that some government agency did, actually saying how dangerous it really is and how real of a threat it really is. Like, this is not just some conspiracy theory. And most people in our government are trying to figure out how to deal with this, because they know it's not if, it's when. And they know that our infrastructure is failing. They know that it takes about 18 months for China to make new generators and power plants and things like that for us to even get. And by that time, even within a year, 90% of the population, what will it be at 18 months? Will it be maybe only 1 to 5% of the population is alive? Will it be like the Georgia Guidestones, where there's, 500 million?
Right.
And worldwide?
Worldwide. And not only that, but let's think about this. If an EMP would hit, and it would hit more than just the U.S., if it would hit China, do you honestly think that they're going to be providing power plants to come our direction? No. All they have to do is bide their time, and then we could be wiped out, because although the electronics will be fried and there may be some fires that happen, most of the other general infrastructure type systems will still be here. And it won't be like an actual bomb is set off where there's destruction of property. It's definitely a lower level as far as that goes, but it's a critical level.
Or imagine if North Korea decided to send one to China and one to the U.S. Well, there goes the world.
Pretty much. Exactly.
That's all you'd need to do. Exactly,
because a lot of the technology the U.S. has, China produces most of the world's goods right now. So, like you said, there wouldn't be a lot needed. Also, I wanted to mention that even if North Korea doesn't act on this and create an EMP, there's a man, John Little, who has a website called omegashock.com. He wrote a 300-plus page book called Ezekiel's Fire, which he offers available. It's available for free, and we'll put a link in the show notes, that talks about how the sun will get 7 times hotter. And if it's in scripture, that is something that is going to come about. We may not know when, but if is out of the picture. It'll definitely be when. And he did extensive research. He explains what Ezekiel's fire is, how it will come about, and what things you need to do to get prepared. And that book is free. So I've read it. It's definitely worth the time and effort to read and understand.
Yeah, we'll link to that for sure. So yeah, even if North Korea doesn't do it, the sun can do it. And I don't know that we would have any warning. I mean, I hate to say it, but I don't think the powers that be are going to tell us if something like that's about to happen.
If the sun has a coronal mass ejection, there is a small window of time, depending on when they see it, before it reaches us. I'm not exactly sure of the time, and it would depend on the size of the CME, but there might be something like 15 to 20 minutes, but that would be even if you hear the instant it happens. The SOHO cameras that they focus on the sun film a lot of those, and there are people who can spread alerts.
Right.
But that depends on the fact that you hear as soon as the alert happens so that you're ready. And who is always that tuned in? Maybe some people are. So some of the things you might want to do is plan ahead. Like I said, it would be important to do a few things ahead to prepare before we're in the midst of an EMP. And there's some excellent resources out there to have some ideas of what to do if you don't have power. One excellent book is Dare to Prepare. That's written by Holly Drennan Deo, Stan Deo's wife. It's a comprehensive guide to all types of disaster preparedness, including EMPs. Another book is Making the Best of Basics. It's written by James Talmadge Stevens. And then a third resource is The Country Living Encyclopedia by Carla Emery. There are lots of resources and instructions for doing things without electricity, not to mention a number of other helpful topics in each of those resources.
Yeah, and speaking of the Dare to Prepare author, Holly Deo, her husband Stan has recently created this product called EMP Shield. And you can find out information on it by going to myempshield.com. You can read a little bit about what it does. It's a few $100s, but if you think about what that would save you if you get something like this, it's well worth it. He's also offering a discount right now. If you go to his website, standeo.com, he talks a little bit about this. I'm not sure how long this is going to be available for, but it's a $50 savings. He was recently also on the Hagman Report. So if you go to their website, and I believe it was within the week, probably sometime since October 20th. So depending on whenever you hear this podcast, 2017. I mean, I know sometimes I listen to podcasts that are several years old, but if you're listening to this recently, go ahead and check out their website too for the podcast and Stan's website for more information on all of that.
Right.
And Stan's also the person who's doing that alternative energy project and has the GoFundMe site. We've talked about that before. So he's a really great resource for finding out more about EMP, how to protect yourself, all of the dangers involved. But other than his EMP shield, I mean, I know that there are simple things you can do to protect electronics. You can have a Faraday cage, which is basically a sealed metal box. Like you could use an old microwave. Microwaves are Faraday cages, I've heard, to maybe store hard drives in or an extra computer. Although you're not going to have Wi-Fi or internet if that happens across the world. But if you stored a bunch of electronic documents or PDF books or something like that, you would be able to use those things on a computer as long as you had power still, if you were able to protect those. Other things that would be important to protect, small electronics that, I don't know, that would be worth it. Maybe a spare cell phone or walkie-talkies. A cell phone's not going to work either, but I mean, possibly if you were able to use some of the functions on it, because cell phones have multiple. You could use a calculator. You could use
right.
Well, calculator's solar, but
James Wesley Rawls, who runs Survival Blog, has all of his website information, which he's been on for years. He has those available. All that information's downloaded on a Kindle that you could buy. And not only can you put that in a microwave that you're not using anymore, that you just use as a Faraday cage, you can purchase Mylar Ziploc type bags, zipper bags. I guess I shouldn't call them Ziploc, but they're Mylar bags that you can put a laptop in. We currently store a spare laptop in a Mylar bag, and the only time it comes out of the bag is when my husband's recharging it or just doing, update maintenance on the computer. So that's going to be available for us then.
Right. I keep, hard drives and jump drives and things like that in a little tin box. You don't have to get something huge. I mean, it would be nice if you could get something large to put somewhere in like a shed, and then store things inside of that. I know that even Dr. Joseph Mercola has a Faraday netting around his bed because, he is a little out there, and I don't necessarily agree with some of his philosophies. I don't believe he's a believer based on some of the things he says, but he's a very smart guy, and he's always way ahead of what is coming out as far as health and wellness. And he's recently done this where he not only doesn't have Wi-Fi in his house, or if he does, it's very limited, and he has it on a timer, which we do as well at our house because we don't want to be constantly bombarded with Wi-Fi signals. But he will not use his cell phone without a selfie stick, and he's got a special like netting cage around his bed at night because at night you're staying in one spot for that entire time, and you don't know what's hitting you. You don't know. I'm sure he probably doesn't have a smart meter unless it's required where he lives, but most people now have smart meters. You're not getting away from that. There's cell phone towers everywhere. We're getting all of that. We're getting our neighbors' Wi-Fi. We're getting all kinds of stuff, and not even just Wi-Fi, but like any electronics. And we're living with more and more electronics constantly surrounding us all the time. So EMPs aren't just dangerous for taking out a country's electricity. It's also dangerous for your cells, the mitochondria in your cells. So that's just something to keep in mind. There's lots of stuff you can do. I'm sure there are probably many other resources that you could just find. If you're interested in something like this, just start digging, especially start with Stan Deyo and listen to some of his podcasts, listen to some of the engineering that goes behind what he does. He's a really, really smart guy. He worked for some pretty high up
Dr. Edward Teller, who was working on electrogravitic motion type technology. He worked with him in the late 70s, early 80s, I believe. And you can also do some research on, as far as the Faraday cages, I've actually seen videos where people have completely lined a room in their house or a shed with, for example, foam panels that have metallic sheeting similar to foil on both sides, and they've actually completely covered a room with that, used metallic tape in between to completely create a Faraday room. And I know other low-tech ideas are using even a galvanized trash can and insulating it, and then putting electronics and things that you need in the future in there. The other thing I wanted to mention about Stan Deyo's EMP shield is he said it will take hundreds of hits and still work, and it is made to be installed. You'd need an electrician, and maybe he'd need 30 minutes of time. They include all the instructions, but it's made to be installed right at your circuit breaker box so that your entire house can be protected by this shield.
Right. Now keep in mind, even though your house may be protected, if the rest of the country isn't and our whole infrastructure goes down, you're still going to need to be responsible for running the appliances in your home. So you're going to need to have either a natural gas generator. I think that you can get natural gas without electricity, the way it flows in the pipes. I'm not absolutely sure about that. I mean, I know it goes towards the lower elevations. So I don't know if they use something to pump it, you know, if you live in a higher elevation. I honestly don't know. I mean, that might be something to look up and figure out. Or, I mean, you could stock up on gas, but gas goes bad and it runs out.
And if there's no pumps, you won't be able to replenish.
Right.
You can also have solar generators.
True.
Now, where we live, we don't have a high level of sunny days per year, so we're a little bit limited there. But there are options, and if you were in a situation like this, you wouldn't run your electricity with everything on at the same time. You would be conserving. You'd be running your refrigerator, and you would maybe turn your refrigerator off or take it off the generator for a short burst of time while you use one other item and then put your refrigerator back on. You would definitely have to be picking and choosing what you're supplying electricity to at the moment.
Right. And honestly, after a week or two, you're not going to have any need for your refrigerator. And you ought to have another refrigeration system lined up, or figure out how to dehydrate or smoke your food, or already have that food in place, freeze-dried food, things like that. Maybe build a root cellar if you have it. We don't have a root cellar in our home, but we actually have a room off of our garage that I've been eyeing up. That's always cool,
right.
And somewhat moist, but not, too. It feels like a refrigerator when you walk inside. It's underground, but if you have a way to do something like that, I mean, that's what people did back then. And I'm sure all of the details are in one of the books that we mentioned previously on how to set that up, how to prepare your food. Hopefully somebody in your family hunts. Right. That's another thing. Stock up on ammo. I mean, it's all basic survival stuff. If you go to yeahbutum.com/podcasts, I have a few places that I looked at. You can take a look at for food storage, bulk supplements, like you can get large bags of vitamin C powder, make your own capsules that it'll stay fresher longer, things like that. It's a way better price than if you wanted to stock up on things like that. That's another thing. If you're not going to have access to fresh fruit and vegetables during the winter months, like around here, we don't, unless we grew it inside. And then again, if you do that, you need the lights and power. So right. If you at least want to have vitamin C and things that you're not easily going to be getting a hold of, Sprouts is a great.
I was just going to mention Sprouts. Sprout House is a place where you can buy sprouts. The seeds will last several years. A lot of them do not require light to germinate. And if you are eating fresh sprouts, you're getting some wonderful protein sources.
Right. It's one of the healthiest things you can eat. So. Right.
So that would be something to have seeds on hand, so that during the winter, even without an EMP, you should be sprouting seeds and adding those to your salads, just in general, to boost your live fresh greens.
Right.
And nutrients that way.
So, I don't know, Mom, do you have any final thoughts on anything? I know that tomorrow, or not tomorrow, 2 days from when we're recording this, depending on when this goes live, is going to be Halloween. Lots of things go on behind the scenes in the kingdom of Satan during that time. So be praying, be on the lookout for anything weird. I told my kids around this time that I've heard witches go around and curse candy
in the grocery stores.
In grocery stores, right? So even if you don't have kids, or even if you're not letting them go out trick or treat or whatever, but they are getting candy around this time of year because of the festivities, or if you are buying candy from the store because it's a good price now or whatever, just be aware of that and pray over the candy before you eat it.
Or pass it. Even if you're going to participate and you're going to pass it out, it wouldn't be a bad idea to pray and break any curses over the candy.
Right.
In Jesus' name. Don't pray it in your own authority. That can bring all kinds of problems. Actually, speaking of bizarre things around Halloween, I didn't even get to share this with Yeahbutum, but yesterday on my way home, I saw right on a major route in our neighborhood a fire in front of an old abandoned gas station, a bunch of people dancing around the fire and chanting. They had witches' hats on.
You're kidding
I should
me.
have pulled over and filmed it, but they were, it was probably a reenactment, but I don't know, but it was right on a major highway. They had witches' hats on, they had brooms, and they were dancing around this little fire pit. And people in the background were clapping, and it was just bizarre. I should have pulled over, but, I was in a hurry to get somewhere.
That's really weird.
And that was the most bizarre Halloweenish thing that I've seen this season.
Yeah, I really don't like Halloween. We didn't let our kids participate. Well, I think we took them out one time when they were 2 or 3. And we told them, we don't celebrate it, but they wanted to go get candy, and they had some cutie little costumes, like a ladybug or something, I don't know. And then we just never did it after that, and we told them why. And this year they're at that age where all of their friends are going and blah, blah, blah. And even their Christian friends, and their Christian friends said, well, my parents said that the Holy Spirit's with us, and if we know that we're not celebrating Satan, and we know the dangers of what actually it is about, and we're just going to get candy with our friends, and we're not wearing scary costumes, and it's not a big deal. And then my husband and I are wrestling with this, no, we want to say no, but then again, we don't want to make our kids hate us, because they just really don't think it's that big of a deal, because I share a lot with them, but not really gory details. They don't need to know that. But then again, they don't understand how bad it really is. So we're going to let them go, with us, actually in my mom's neighborhood. We're going to bring them over here.
Right.
And walk around with them. And they're a banana and a unicorn or something. And yeah, I know a unicorn could be a hybrid. Yeah. I don't want to hear it. But I don't know. I don't feel great about it. But then again, I don't want my kids to be fearful of things or hide from things. I want them to be aware and knowledgeable. It's just a really hard decision. So whatever you guys are deciding, it doesn't matter to me. I hope I don't start getting hate email or something, because I do, I do struggle with it.
It is something each individual is going to be accountable for, and it is hard. I mean, we need to be in the world, not of the world, but we also don't want to fear Satan in a way that seems like God has no power, because God's power is still stronger, and Christ overcame Satan at the cross, and right. We want to be aware of that, and we don't want to live in fear of Satan. We want to live in the power of the cross of Christ and the victory that he gave us. Right.
And my kids have recently gone to several birthday parties, and they're all Halloween themed because it's around this time, and I'm not going to tell them, no, you can't go with your friends because their parents are having a Halloween themed birthday party, and it's just, that seems kind of silly to me. Even though I know their parents and I'm comfortable with them, like I said, a lot of other people who call themselves Christians really don't see the harm in Halloween. They think it's all fun and games. They don't understand the history. And even though I do, and I wouldn't have a Halloween party or something like that, I understand. I mean, I was a kid. I remember wanting to do that. I remember you guys struggling with the same things. Some years you might let me, some years you didn't. It was just because it's hard, it's a hard thing, but there are bad things that happen on Halloween. So I understand people's reasoning for not wanting to have anything to do with it. If I didn't have children, I would have nothing to do with it. But anyway, so I don't know what we're going to talk about next time, guys. We weren't even sure about this until literally 5 minutes before we decided to record it. So hopefully if you have more questions, you can research it or reach out to any of these people. I know Standeo is really great about getting back to people. So if you find something on his site and you email him, he'll probably get back to you and answer your questions. He's very approachable and knowledgeable. So have a good week, and we'll talk to you next time.
Take it easy.
Thank you for listening to Yeahbutum Media. Don't forget to check the show notes at yeahbutum.com for links to everything that was mentioned in this episode. You can also find us at facebook.com/Yeahbutum or on Twitter at Yeahbutum. Keep an eye out for our next episode. And would you do us a huge favor? Please subscribe to our podcast, share this podcast, or even tell a friend about it. We would love it if you would rate and review our podcast on iTunes. And don't forget to sign up for our mailing list at yeahbutum.com. And if you feel inclined, we would love your support on Patreon. Thanks. See you next time.